Morning everyone. Today we are going to continue with our lesson, the French Revolution. Today we will do the topic abolition of slavery. Here, as you all can see, there is a quote by Olympe de Gouges. You all know about her. She was a very famous revolutionary woman of the France. What she told, why are black people enslaved? Why do we enslave the black people? The color of the people's skin only suggests a slight difference. According to her, the color of the skin is only a slight difference, like there is a discord between day and night. In the day we have sunlight, whereas in the moon, because the moonlight is not so bright, so we have darkness. So this is what she is trying to say, that we all are human beings. Why do we need to suppress someone to make them a slave? So we are going to continue with our lesson today, and we will know more about slavery in the next slide. As you all know, that slavery is a new word for you all, and we will know the meaning of slavery in the next slide, why the slavery was happening in the France and why it was so important. So let's move to the next slide. Slavery. Slavery, you must have heard about this word. In Hindi, we call it as a gulami. You must have heard this word gulami. And you must have seen in many movies that there were many slaves who rose to the power of military commanders, and there was a slave dynasty also in India. So slavery was not a new practice, it was a very old practice that was happening in the world. Now here they don't require the slave for their armies. The people in the France, they required the slave to work in their plantation. Now you must be wondering that which plantation are we talking about? Now, as you all know, that all the European countries had their colonies. Most of the European countries had their colonies throughout the world. Like India was a colony of the Britisher, South Africa was a colony of the Britisher. So France also had a colony in North America, especially in the Caribbean islands. They also had a colony. Even they had few colony, few parts of India was under them, but later on they left this colony and they went back to France. So now, what do we see here? That in these colonies, the French people had big plantation where they used to grow crops like tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee. All these, it's not all the. Let's continue our topic. We are going to do about the slavery. Slavery is not a new word for you. It is, you must have read about this word and the meaning of slavery. Let me tell you, in Hindi, you must have heard a word called gulami. So gulami in Hindi, which we call it, is slavery in English. Okay, so you know the meaning of slavery in Hindi now. Now, the slaves, you must have heard about the slaves are being bought and sold in the market. You must have heard about the slave dynasty which ruled in India during the medieval time, and you must have heard about many kings who were very famous slaves who were very famous slaves, and they became king later on. Now, you must have heard about Kutubuddin Aibak, who was also one of the commander in the Gauri's army, and he became, later on, he became the ruler of Delhi, and he is one of the famous slave ruler of India. Now, let us come back to the France. Now, as you all know, that most of the European countries had their colonies throughout the world. Like for India, India was the colony of the Britisher. Same way, South Africa was also a colony of the British. So, the French people also had colonies, and you must have done in the previous class that French also came to India and they made their colony here. But later on, they left India and then they went back to France. So, French had a colony in the Caribbean islands, which is near the North America. Now, in these colonies, the rich French people had big plantation where they used to grow crops like tobacco, indigo, sugarcane, and coffee. These crops were sold in the market, and to work in these plantations, the French people needed workers. And now from where the workers will come? Because the French or the European people were not ready to leave their place or to go to their distant land because of the travel time as well as because of the change of weather, and so they did not want it. Now, who will work in the plantation? So they required some people. Now, from where the people started coming? Most of the people came from the Africa where the French had a colony. Now, these people were bought from Africa and they were sold in the market. This is how the slave trade began. Now, this slave trade was a triangular slave trade. Slaves were brought from Africa. They were brought to the Europe, and from Europe uh, they were sold and then they were sent to America. So if you will see, the three countries were involved, and these three countries made the triangular slave trade. Now, there were more than 5 lakh slaves in 1789, and they provided the labor for sugar, coffee, and cotton plantation. As you all can see till now, that there are many people from South Africa, and not only from South Africa, from Africa living in America and Caribbean islands. You all are aware about it. So let's move to the next line and let us know more about the slave trade that was happening in the French colonies. Let us continue our topic. Let us know more about the trade routes. Now, French merchants, as I have told you earlier, they sailed to the African coast from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes. These are the two important ports in France from where the French merchants sailed towards Africa. They bought the slaves from the local people over there, the local traders, the local people who used to sell the poor people. They bought, they bought these people from them, and these people were brought to Europe where they were again sold, and they were purchased by the rich people of the third state, or the nobles used to purchase them and they used to work in their plantation. Now, due to this, what do we see? That the port cities like Bordeaux and Nantes became economically prosperous. They became rich, and even the merchants also they became rich. As you can see in the figure which is just on the side of the slide, you can see that what was the outcome of the abolition of slavery, how the triangular trade used to happen in the 17th and the 18th century. As we can see that people in the Europe, they used to take the raw material and they used to sell the finished good. You will study more about it in grade 10. Like so what do we see? From where the raw material will come? Now the raw material was coming from America, because there was big plantation, and in these plantation the goods were grown and they were given as a raw material to the European people. And they, after getting the raw material, they used to make the finished product. Now this finished product was sold in their colonies. So in which colony, what do we see here? That in Africa they used to go, they used to give the finished products, and then they used to, from that money, they used to buy the poor people from there who came as slaves to the Europe. Now these slaves were again sold in the America, because they used to give them slaves and then they used to take the raw material from America. That was the reason behind it. That was the reason behind this slave trade, because they wanted to have the raw material, and to get the raw material they required the labor, and now the labor was the slaves who used to come from the Africa. Once these slaves used to come here, they were not allowed to go back to their home. Okay, they used to become the property of their masters. So here there are another thing written over here, which we will discuss in the next slide, that what happened to the slavery and why it was abolished. So let's move to the next slide. Let us know more about the slavery and the phases of the slavery in France. What do we see? That during the time of the old regime, the slavery was existing in the France, and the people used to criticize about it. They used to talk about it, that why we are having a slavery. Mostly this criticism was done by the philosophers or the people of the third state, especially the poor people. They used to discuss all these things. But during the time of the old regime, the king and the nobles or the clergies were not at all interested in abolishing the slavery, because that state was only benefiting from this slavery. Now, when the National Assembly was made, they also started discussing in detail about whether the rights of men should be extended to all the French citizens, including those who are in the colonies, including to the slaves. But no decision was taken. Why no decision was taken? Because the members of the National Assembly, as we all know, were the rich people of the third state. Now, rich people had their plantation in the colonies, so they were not interested to abolish the slavery. So, when the Jacobin rules came in 1794, the convention, what they did, they abolished the slavery, and this was done under the leadership of Maximilian Robespierre, because he was the first, this was the first elected assembly of the republic after the death, after the execution of the monarch. This was the first elected assembly. Now, he abolished the slavery. Why he abolished the slavery? There was a reason behind it, because as we all know, that the members of the convention were the poor people, and these poor people were not at all, they were we can say they did not had a plantation. They were knowing about the problems of the poor people. They were knowing how hard it was for a person to be a slave. So they discussed about it, and then slavery was abolished in the France. They wanted equality, and they said everyone should get the equality. So slavery was abolished in the France and its colonies. But this did not last it for a long. After 10 years, we all know that in 1804, when the directory rule was not able to give a stable government in France, the Napoleon Bonaparte, he declared himself as a as emperor of the France. And when he declared as the emperor of France, he started talking about the trade to be flourished. He started talking about trade to be flourished so that there will be no economic crisis in the France, and the France will become economically strong. Now, and he also wanted to please the rich people, the rich section of the society, so they can earn more and they can make the France as a rich country. So what he did, he again started the slavery in the France, and he said that it is their right to enslave African blacks. So now again the slavery was introduced in France, and these slaves were known as African Negroes. They were called as the African Negroes. Finally, the slavery continued, and after a long struggle, the slavery was abolished in the year 1848. This is how the slavery in the France was abolished. So today what we have learned about the triangular trade, we have learned about the slaves, and we have also learned why the slaves were brought from Africa and what happened to them, why they were so important for the French people, and how the slave trade made the French people rich. Who abolished the slavery in the France? We have studied about this today, that Jacobins, when they came into the power, they abolished the slavery, and again the slavery was reintroduced after the Napoleon came to the power. So this was your topic, and I hope you all have understood your topic today. Thank you very much.